Hey, and welcome back to the Origin Matters podcast. Today is a special episode. I'm joined by the two co-founders of ORIVO, Svein Erik Haugmo, who is our current CEO, and Erik Fuglseth, who's our current CTO. And we're going back to the very beginning of how two Norwegian scientists turned an idea into a company that uses science to drive transparency and trust across 5 different industries. So, Svein Erik and Erik, it's great to have you here. And to kick us off, let's get started with a bit of a background from both of you. Can you introduce where you're from and what originally got you into science?
Yes, sure. And thank you so much for being part of our own podcast. This is really exciting. Yeah, I normally go first. Isn't that how we do it, Erik?
Go ahead.
Yes. Perfect. Our background, I'm from Molde, a small town in Norway. I live here now with a family of with a wife and two daughters, soon grown up now. Yeah, soon 50 years old. 14 of those has been very much about origin.
What initially led you into science? Like, say, these young school kid, Svein Erik, when you were finishing school, what made you initially think that science and going down that path was going to be good for you?
Yeah, that's a cool one. Well, I don't know about you, Erik, but I got this chemistry set like this when I was a kid, where you can do some cool chemistry stuff and some magnesium that blew up with a big white light and stuff like that. If you lit it with a match, and that really teased my curiosity for chemistry and science. And when in high school, I was not the typical geeky one that wanted to go dig deep into science, but I was like a soccer player and wanted to have fun with friends and all that. But something there, the curiosity was still there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be the cool scientist. So I went full like mathematics, physics, chemistry, and that was my introduction to the field of science.
Nice. I also remember burning magnesium in chemistry class at school. It was definitely the highlight.
Yeah, I guess Erik has a slightly different approach, but maybe not.
No, I think my motivation for chemistry, I think I've always been like nature and science. The science classes have always fascinated me, but I think the one that really pushed me in the direction of the chemistry was the lab work. I think that was what fascinated me, that you could like start with 2 different dull materials, put them together and make something that had a color or different properties. That was, I think, the motivation behind my journey within chemistry.
That's quite similar, though.
Interesting. And how did you guys both connect? Did you both end up working at a lab together, or and at that point, did you have a sense that you'd end up building a company together, or what was the sort of time when you guys first met, and how did you guys realize that you might end up building a company one day?
We are from the same small town in Norway, so we've grown up not too far away from each other actually, but we have never went to school together because of the age difference. So we've never really met before. We returned to our hometown after studying at the university, and then we were connected via a common friend that knew both of us separately, and he knew that Svein Erik was working on some exciting chemistry related project, and he knew that I was a chemist looking for such a project, and then he connected us. And after that, we realized that it was a good match, both personally and also in terms of background and knowledge. So started the building.
But it was quite a coincidence. I think this is a bit of a funny story, because we could have met on this event for entrepreneurs, and then because the part 2 of that. Part 1 was listening to some other successful entrepreneurs. Part 2 was a speed dating session. Being the extrovert, that was what I came for. Erik, being less extrovert, he went home. But then this common friend, we speed dated, and then And he just understood that, okay, this thing Svein Erik is about to start could be something interesting for Erik. And then by a coincidence, he matched us. That, yeah, it as many things in life, that was actually a very good coincidence.
That's interesting. I always just presumed that you guys, because you both went to NTNU University, correct? But just different times. I always presumed that you guys first met and then went on different paths and worked in different labs and then an idea sort of formulated. But that's super interesting to learn.
People can't tell, but Erik is 4 years younger than me, so that's why.
Yeah, and then I think we were at the university, the same university at the same time, but we have studied slightly different topics. So I'm an organic chemist by training. So I did my master and PhD at different faculty, or at least different institute than Svein Erik.
Yeah, that's true. So while Erik did his PhD, I was finishing my master's degree. That was at the same time, actually, but different faculties, yes.
Understood. And it sounds like you initially maybe came up with a spark of the idea for ORIVO, Svein Erik, but what led you to that moment? What made you think that you want to use this type of technology, and made you think that there's a challenge out there that needs to be solved?
So at the time, 12, 13, 14 years ago, I was the manager of a laboratory company in Molde. And then I always wanted to do something special, something cool with my background. Managing a laboratory company, obviously great experience. Always had this entrepreneur inside. And then through the business we did in that company, I came across the omega-3 industry, and that always fancied me as a very interesting business. And then this technology came along that we're able to actually trace a fish oil back to its origin. And then I thought I want to jump on this and try to make a business out of it. And obviously challenges in the industry was a driver for it as well. It was mainly like a drive to just take the most interesting part of what I was doing as a manager in that laboratory contract lab company and just try to make a business out of it.
Interesting. And what was the early years like when you went from both being scientists to early stage startup? Being an entrepreneur is always challenging, but I guess going from being a leader of a scientific lab into starting a startup, tell me about what those days were like.
I think Erik can fill you in there, because for me it was, as I said, just something I wanted to do. Luckily, I also found one guy that actually knew how to do it in a way.
I think, it was definitely a rough start. After I finished my PhD, I worked some time at the local, the university technology transfer office. So helping professors and scientists with good ideas to make them into business. So during that time, I learned a lot about how to commercialize science. And that was very relevant, of course, when Svein Erik and I started. And the term bootstrapping, luckily I had learned that. So meaning building a business basically without any money, because that was the case in we didn't have any income. We had a technology that was not ready to use. We needed to develop that. We needed to do more research. All of this obviously costs money, and we didn't have money. So we applied for grants. We did carpenter work to basically have some sort of income in the beginning with very limited pay. So it was a rough period for our wives, I think, in particular, with long days and little income. But little by little, we managed to build a foundation that we could grow from.
Yeah. I didn't really have the full plan settled, because because I started a bit on my own, like hybrid from this contract lab as a manager, moving into fully 100% entrepreneur of ORIVO. Then Erik came along November. But as Erik said, we managed, and we got very experienced in the bootstrapping and searching for funds and all that. So We have had salary every month.
Awesome. Well, that's super interesting to hear about the story. And I think that until you go through a startup or a couple of startups, I think people like to idolize the journey of a startup and they show these extreme growth curves. But it's only until you actually work in one that you realize occasionally you might need to put up a door or do some carpentry work for someone to get some money in to get to the next stage. But on the next question, I guess with all startups and lots of businesses, there's sort of a turning point where something turns from an idea or something that you're trying to change, especially maybe when you're using new technology and trying to get different people out there in the world to see this technology and to use it and to become customers. But what would you say that sort of turning point was for ORIVO when you could start putting down the hammers and getting back into the lab and really making something of the company?
I don't know, Erik.
Oh, I think that was, it's to me at least quite clear. During the first years, we got business with producers, salmon meal, fish oil, early in the value chain. But the big turning point to me was when we met the brand working out of Poland, Natural Pharmaceuticals, back in 2016, where they were super clear that we value this service. We want to use this service to promote that we are a trusted brand to our consumers. And that was something, of course, we had thought of, that we could be this B2B2C tool, but we thought that would be like in 10 years, something like that. We would have to be like a big established, well-known brand in the B2B market before we could make that step. But that happened really quick, and I think after that we realized that we could have a different business model than what we earlier thought.
Yeah, I would agree. That was like the typical, it was like a random chat with this guy from this company during a cocktail session at one of the GoEd meetings, I think, where, I want your logo on my bottle, he said. And we just, I don't think, okay, we can make a logo. And then from there, we got Golden Omega that already were interested in this, but we have said maybe this is for the future. And then they had a bunch of clients they introduced to us that also wanted the logo on the bottle, and then it really started rolling.
Interesting. When you start to find that natural pull coming from honest brands that want to be able to tell that story, and when it naturally starts flowing. And then the next point that I wanted to discuss is building a business it's a big journey. It's a long journey. And on a personal level, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of extra hours that often aren't remunerated, especially at the beginning. But what's driving each of you along the way? What keeps you guys motivated to persevere through the challenges and to continue to drive to see ORIVO continue to grow and produce more transparency around the world?
For me, I think this comes down to trust. Consumer trust has always been an important topic, and in products where the consumer can't really check if this is authentic or not, if it's a shoe or like a Lacoste t-shirt or something, consumers basically they can see the difference between fake products and authentic products, and some choose to buy the fake stuff because it's cheap. In supplements and the areas we work, that is not really possible. So that gap between a need for trust from consumers and the ability to prove this from the honest companies, the honest brands, that really is what drives me. And omega-3 is a small fraction of examples of business areas and products where the ORIVO concept can be applied. And there were really no player 10 years ago that can do this, and still a player that's scientific, like evidence-based driven as us, is not really there. And that to be like that pioneer globally, that's definitely what drives me.
Yeah, and I would say also the scientist in me. I've always liked making things and building things, and I'm motivated by that part. But here it's to use chemistry to do something meaningful and something good is really motivating. I've spent 4 years in the lab during my PhD doing doing a lot of chemistry, but it wasn't always that easy to see how can this be applied. And this is very applied. We always do these things for it's always for a good reason, I think, and that's motivating.
Super interesting. And looking ahead, what's the vision now? Where do you guys see ORIVO going in the next 5 to 10 years? Svein Erik, you mentioned that there's different applications or different industries that this might be applicable for. Is ORIVO mainly going to continue focusing on marine-based products, or is there other things in the scope that we are looking at, or different areas within marine-based products that might be on our radar in the future?
It's really unlimited opportunities, but there are still a lot to do within the omega-3 space, both for humans and pets. We have chosen to be a global footprint, which means that we are just scratching the surface in China, just scratching the surface in the US, definitely scratching the surface in Europe and South America. And there are also areas in the world we haven't started scratching. So on the medium range, definitely omega-3 supplements for humans and pets. And then next thing, pet food. We have big potential, but to really create consumer value, need to be across more segments, because the final user of our service, that's the same person, but that person want to have this evidence for more than supplements, like Serrano ham, Manuka honey, extra virgin olive oil, wine from this area, Napa Valley wines. It's endless of opportunities, but we really just need to do things in a scalable and proper way.
Makes sense. And what about you, Erik? Any thoughts about the future? Or
yeah, it's super exciting times. We're now 10 employees, and in definitely in a growth phase, like Svein Erik says. We're focusing now on broadening the footprint in the markets where we already are. Pet food is really exciting. I think there's both big potential and a big need for our services there. And then after that, we will have to wait and see. But there are definitely many opportunities. So really exciting times ahead, I think.
I think also the AI trend is very interesting. In one way, it will help us and most companies scale faster and enter into new segments faster. But it also gives consumers a lot more information. But as we all know, AI is not necessarily always the truth. It's also a risk that AI-driven verification solutions can give a false positive feeling for consumers. So the need for evidence will be even bigger than it has been, because now people actually need that evidence.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining and listening or watching this episode of Origin Matters. And feel free to subscribe or follow us on any of the different channels that you might listen to podcasts, and stay in tune for the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.